Have you ever sat there listening to someone go on and on about honesty, only to catch them lying straight to someone's face later that very same day? Or watched a boss constantly preach cost-cutting, while still going out every week and expensing lavish meals to the company? In moments like that, you feel a certain discomfort rising inside you, something hard to name. What you just witnessed, in fact, has a very clear name: hypocrisy. But what's more unsettling isn't those people. What's more unsettling is us, you and me, because sometimes we do the exact same thing without even realizing it. We condemn others for behaviors we quietly repeat every day. We set standards for those around us, yet grant ourselves endless exceptions. In today's video, I'm not going to talk about other people. I want to hand you a mirror, and together, we'll look straight into it. Because hypocrisy doesn't come in just one form. It exists on 7 distinct levels, ranging from harmless to deeply dangerous. And you may be surprised to discover where you stand among them. Level 1. Idealistic hypocrisy. Let's start with the mildest level, the one most of us fall into, yet rarely admit. I have a friend. He's always the first to share posts about protecting the environment. He urges people to use cloth bags instead of plastic, to cut down on waste, to ride bicycles to reduce emissions. But every morning, he still rides his motorbike, still grabs takeaway coffee in a single-use plastic cup, still orders food delivered in layers of styrofoam packaging. If you ask him about it, he'll say he knows. He's trying to change gradually, but life is complicated, and it's not that easy. Is he a bad person? No. He genuinely believes in what he says, but he's standing right at level 1 of hypocrisy, what psychologists call the gap between ideals and reality. Human beings have a remarkable ability. We can imagine a better version of ourselves. We picture someone who is always patient, never loses their temper, eats clean, exercises regularly, and lives in alignment with what they preach. And we truly want to become that person. The problem is, between who we aspire to be and who we actually are, there's always a significant gap. The French philosopher La Rochefoucauld once wrote a line that still holds true today. Hypocrisy is the homage vice pays to virtue. It may sound abstract, but it's actually quite simple. When someone advocates for what is good, even if they haven't fully lived it yet, they are still acknowledging that it's worth striving for. That's why this first level is considered the least harmful, sometimes even a sign of conscience. But here's the danger. When we get used to saying one thing and doing another for too long, the brain starts to normalize it. We stop feeling that inner discomfort, and that's the first step down a much darker path. So how do you know if you're at this level? It's simple. Think about what you most often advise or preach to others. Then ask yourself honestly, what percentage of that are you actually living? If the answer makes you hesitate, even just a little, then welcome to level 1. No need to be ashamed. You're not alone. All of us are here, including the person speaking to you right now. Level 2. Situational hypocrisy. If level 1 is the gap between ideals and reality, then level 2 is a step more dangerous, because it's no longer accidental. People know, they understand, yet they still choose to grant themselves an exception, and they always have a very convincing reason for doing so. Imagine a mother who constantly teaches her child never to lie, that honesty must be upheld no matter the circumstances. But one day, when someone calls asking if she's home, she signals to her child to say she's not there. The child looks at her, confused. The mother whispers, "It's someone I don't want to see. Just say that so we can avoid it." The moment passes, but in the child's mind, a very large question mark has just been planted. That is situational hypocrisy. The principle is still there, still believed to be true, but when it becomes inconvenient, people begin to negotiate with themselves. And that negotiation always comes with a reason that sounds perfectly reasonable. Psychologists call this phenomenon moral licensing. The mechanism is fascinating. When we do something good, our brain automatically feels as if we've earned enough moral credit and then gives us permission to do something less admirable right afterward without guilt. Someone who has just donated to charity may find it easier to cut corners elsewhere. Someone who has dieted strictly all week may reward themselves with a weekend binge. They don't see contradiction, they see balance. The key difference between level 2 and level 1 lies here. At level 1, people fail because they're weak or not yet capable. At level 2, they are fully capable of doing the right thing, but choose not to because today's situation is a little different. And that little difference starts to appear more and more often over time. What's truly concerning is that we live in a society that constantly supplies us with reasons to excuse ourselves. Everyone is busy. Everyone is under pressure. Everyone has their own circumstances. And when reasons are always available, principles slowly become decorative, nice to display, but rarely used when they actually matter. Here's a simple question to check yourself at this level. Think about the last time you did something that went against what you usually stand for. Did you tell yourself, this time is different? If you did, you've just caught yourself at level 2. Level 3, unconscious hypocrisy. If at level 2, people know what they're doing, but choose to justify it, then level 3 is more unsettling in a very different way. At this level, people are completely unaware of their own contradictions. They genuinely believe they are living in alignment with what they say. And that's exactly what makes this one of the hardest forms of hypocrisy to correct in the first half of this 7-level journey. Think of a manager who often tells employees that the workplace should be open, that everyone should feel free to speak up without hesitation. But the moment someone actually voices a dissenting opinion, his expression changes. His tone turns colder, his responses shorter, and the meeting ends sooner than expected. No one dares to say anything further. Yet if you ask him directly whether he truly listens to his employees, he will nod without hesitation and say, "Of course, that's something I always encourage." He isn't lying. He truly believes it. In psychology, this is known as a blind spot. Each of us has blind spots within ourselves, areas we cannot see, even though they are obvious to others. And the biggest blind spots often lie exactly where we feel most confident about who we are. A well-known psychological study conducted in 1999 by David Dunning and Justin Kruger found that those with the lowest ability in a domain often rate themselves the highest, simply because they lack the knowledge needed to recognize their own mistakes. The same principle applies to unconscious hypocrisy. Those who reflect on themselves the least are often the most convinced that they are living with complete integrity. What makes level 3 especially complex is that it often appears in people who are genuinely kind, who hold real values, who truly want to do the right thing. Precisely because they are good, they don't question themselves. And because they don't question themselves, they never see the gap between who they think they are and who they actually appear to be. The only way out of this level is not to try harder to self-reflect, because a blind spot cannot be seen on your own. The only way is to have the courage to ask the people around you, the ones who truly know you, how they see you. And more importantly, to have the strength to sit still and listen to their answers, without explaining, without defending, without pushing back. That is one of the hardest things a person can do. But without it, the door to the deeper, more dangerous levels remains wide open. Level 4, double standards. We've just gone through 3 levels where, in one way or another, people are still deceiving themselves. They don't realize it, or they have their reasons, or they genuinely want to be better but haven't managed it yet. But from level 4 onward, things take a very different turn, because here the contradiction is no longer contained within the self, it starts being imposed on others. Double standards arise when someone uses 2 entirely different yardsticks to judge the same behavior, depending on whether it's their own actions or someone else's. Picture this. A man arrives late to work and explains that the traffic was terrible. There was nothing he could do. But when a colleague shows up late with the exact same reason, he shakes his head and calls them unprofessional, someone who doesn't know how to manage their time. Same action, same circumstances, yet completely different judgments depending on who did it. Or a more familiar example at home. A father constantly reminds his children to keep their promises. If you say it, you do it. Yet he promises to take them out on the weekend, then cancels because of work. He promises to be home for dinner, then sends a message saying he's stuck in a meeting. When the children react, he explains that his responsibilities are different, that he carries greater burdens. And yet, that same reasoning never seems to apply when he judges others for breaking their word. What's important to understand is that double standards don't always come from bad intentions. Psychologists explain that when we look at our own actions, we see them from the inside out. We're aware of the context, the pressure, the reasons behind what we did. But when we look at others, we only see the outcome, not the circumstances. So we become lenient with ourselves and harsh with others, often without even noticing it. But whether intentional or not, the consequences are always the same. Double standards erode trust. They create injustice in relationships. And over time, they turn the people around us into those who stay silent and endure rather than speak honestly. Recognizing this in yourself is actually quite simple. The next time you're about to judge someone, pause for a moment and ask, if I were the one in their place, would I accept my own explanation? If the answer is yes, then offer the other person the same grace. It's a small habit, but it can profoundly change how you see others and how you see yourself. Level 5, selective hypocrisy. If double standards at level 4 mean applying two different yardsticks to ourselves and others, then level 5 is more subtle and far more ruthless. Because here, people don't just distinguish between themselves and outsiders. They draw distinctions even among those around them, based on one simple question. What value does this person have to me? Selective hypocrisy is when principles are enforced only on those we dislike, while everything becomes flexible for those we need, favor, or want to keep close. Think of someone who frequently posts on social media about fairness, about not showing favoritism or covering for anyone. But when their close friend is accused of wrongdoing, they immediately step in to defend them, offering every possible justification. The situation is more complicated than it seems. We need to hear all sides. We shouldn't rush to conclusions. Meanwhile, when it's someone they don't like, even an unverified rumor is enough for them to share and comment on loudly. What makes this level particularly dangerous is that it often hides behind things that appear noble. It's called loyalty. It's called protecting friends. It's framed as standing by those who've been good to you. And while those ideas aren't entirely wrong, the moment loyalty is used to excuse wrongdoing, it stops being a virtue. It becomes a tool, one that determines who our principles apply to and who they don't. In history and everyday life, this kind of hypocrisy produces very real consequences. It's why, in many organizations, those with close ties to leadership can get away with mistakes, while outsiders are punished harshly for minor ones. It's why families sometimes defend a member to the very end, even when they know that person is in the wrong, simply because they're family. And it's why so many friendships and professional relationships slowly fracture. Once people realize they are treated well only as long as they remain useful. The American writer James Baldwin once said, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." Selective hypocrisy is exactly the kind of thing most people are unwilling to confront within themselves, because it forces us to admit that we're not always standing for fairness or truth. Sometimes we're just protecting our circle and calling it principle. And once someone becomes accustomed to choosing where their principles apply, they are only one step away from the final two levels, where hypocrisy is no longer just a personal contradiction, but something that begins to cause direct harm to others. Level 6. Punishing others for what you do yourself. From level 1 to level 5, no matter the degree, hypocrisy mostly harms the person engaging in it. They contradict themselves, deceive themselves, undermine themselves. But at level 6, that boundary is completely broken. Other people begin to pay the price for contradictions they had no part in creating. This is the level where someone condemns, punishes, even destroys others for the very behaviors they themselves are secretly engaging in. History offers no shortage of examples. Some of the most outspoken moral crusaders, those who preach purity, discipline, integrity, are later exposed for doing exactly what they once denounced. This pattern isn't accidental. Psychologists explain it as a highly sophisticated defense mechanism of the mind. When a person harbors desires or behaviors they know are wrong, one way the brain relieves that guilt is by aggressively attacking others who do the same. The harsher the condemnation, the more they feel aligned with righteousness, and the guilt inside them is temporarily soothed. Sigmund Freud called this mechanism projection. People project onto others what they cannot admit in themselves, then judge outwardly instead of confronting inwardly. But level 6 goes beyond words. What makes it truly dangerous is how real and tangible the consequences become. A corrupt manager may fire an employee over suspected dishonesty. A father who is unfaithful may impose strict control and punishment on his children out of fear they will go astray. A politician who takes bribes may deliver passionate speeches about fighting corruption and actively go after others. In all these cases, the victims are real people, often more innocent than the one punishing them. What makes this level especially painful is that those being punished often don't understand why. They don't see themselves as having done anything that deserves such severity. They feel the injustice, but can't quite trace its source, because the one judging them appears principled, even trustworthy. Recognizing level 6 in the world around you isn't difficult. Recognizing it within yourself is something else entirely. The next time you feel a sudden, intense surge of anger towards someone else's behavior, pause and ask with complete honesty, is there any part of me that does the same thing? The answer may be uncomfortable, but that discomfort is exactly where the truth begins. Level 7, systemic hypocrisy. The first 6 levels, whether mild or severe, are still the story of an individual, a person contradicting themselves, justifying themselves, even punishing others for what they themselves do. But at level 7, we're no longer talking about a person. We're talking about an entire machine, deliberately built to turn those contradictions into rules, into institutions, into something an entire society is expected to obey. Systemic hypocrisy is when a group, an organization, or a government constructs principles and values that sound noble and righteous, yet the very people who create those rules are never bound by them. Human history is filled with painful examples. Colonial empires once raised banners of enlightenment and civilization, preaching freedom and human rights, while simultaneously exploiting, subjugating, and killing millions in the lands they occupied. Religious institutions have condemned sin from the pulpit, while concealing grave wrongdoing within their own walls. On a smaller but familiar scale, corporations display core values like integrity and respect across their offices, while their leadership signs off on deals no employee is ever allowed to know about. What makes Level 7 fundamentally different and more dangerous than all the others is its durability. Once hypocrisy is institutionalized, it no longer depends on any single individual. The people who built the system may leave, but the system keeps running, continuing to generate new contradictions. The next generation inherits it, follows it, defends it, even believes in it, because they were born into it, raised within it, with nothing else to compare it to. The French philosopher Michel Foucault pointed out that real power doesn't lie in who can force whom to act. Real power lies in who gets to define what is normal, what is right, and what is wrong. That is exactly what systemic hypocrisy does. It reshapes reality in ways that benefit those who operate within it, and then persuades everyone else that this version of reality is objective truth. Recognizing systemic hypocrisy requires a different kind of courage than the previous 6 levels. Because when you call it out, you're not just criticizing an individual, you're challenging an entire structure, one that many people benefit from and will not easily let go of. And that is precisely why understanding all 7 levels matters. Every form of systemic hypocrisy begins at the smaller levels. From an individual unwilling to examine themselves, from a double standard left unchallenged, from a small injustice no one speaks up about. If we don't learn to see it within ourselves first, we will never recognize it as it grows around us.